Epilogue. I knock on the wooden door of the office. Come in. I enter as a small, gray-haired woman looks up from her computer. I'm Eli Samuels, I'm saying. Sorry I'm late, Dr. Fukuyama. Rosemary Fukuyama nods toward the window as she removes her half glasses and lets them dangle from a chain around her neck. The blizzard of the decade beginning out there, so I'm impressed you came at all, though it certainly helps on this campus that we have the tunnels. Then, she takes the fact that my coat and hat are coated with snow. I guess you didn't use them to get here from your dorm. I remove my coat and hang it up. Then, at her invitation, sit down on the other side of a crowded but tidy desk. I don't live on the MIT campus, Dr. Fukuyama. I live with my father, over near Central Square. That's a little unusual. Dr. Fukuyama raises an eyebrow. Most freshmen want to move away from their families. I shrugged. There wasn't dorm space for me, even if I wanted to live on campus, which I hadn't. I wanted to stay with my father this year at least. I wasn't originally going to be in this class at all, I tell her. I applied and was admitted at the last minute in August on an exception basis. I know. Dr. Fumiyawa waves a hand toward her computer. I was just reading your file. I was particularly intrigued by the letter from Larry Donahue. He was a student of mine. Yes, I say. He was the one who told me to move heaven and earth to try to get into your seminar this semester. He told me he emailed you about it. Her eyes were intent on me now. I wouldn't have seen you at all otherwise. My bioethics seminar is exclusively for seniors and graduate students, and I can only admit 8 students. I want to be one of them, I say. It's only half the truth. What I most want to know is Dr. Rosemary Fukuyama, whose 3 books on bioethics my father, Viv, Kayla, and I have all read, and, through her, to meet other scientists like her. You worked for Larry last summer at General Transgenics, said Dr. Fukuyama. Her voice lingers an extra moment. On the new name of the company. Tell me about that. So I tell her about the transgenics rabbits and the proteins expressed in milk and the ordinary duties around the lab, but I have the impression that she's only listening on the surface, that she, like most people in biodynamics this past year, can't think of general transgenics without compulsively wondering about Dr. Wyatt and the incidents last spring. Wyatt's transgenics is dead, but General Transgenics lives on without Dr. Wyatt. He disappeared along with Judith Ryan and 3 high-ranking scientists on the day that Kayla attacked him in the elevator. Things moved rapidly after that. The federal authorities arrived, the board of directors met, and 3 days later the company was reorganized with a businessman who had a stellar background in pharmaceutical industry appointed as a new CEO. Of course, rumors spread like fire around the building and the industry. One popular guess about Dr. White and the others was that they had participated in an illegal experiment involving human cloning. Even more popular was the theory that they had embezzled company funds. Indeed, in the weeks that followed the reorganization, accountants swarmed the building like insects. But, in the end, the cover-up, or whatever it was too tight for anyone to be certain about anything. And perhaps strangely, and certainly, unlike many of the major business scandals, there was no public charges filed. I had no inside information, either, although the federal authorities talked to me and Kayla a little bit at the start of the investigation. It had begun with us, after all. Begun with my father calling the police after I telephoned him from the sub-basement. Soon enough, the authorities had nothing more to say to us. We'll handle this, we were told by an impassive, skinny bald man in a blue suit. It's your job, not yours. Go back to your lives. So, we were left with more unknowns than we could account. Dr. Fukuyama leans forward. It's become almost standard small talk in the biotech industry to speculate about Dr. Wyatt's whereabouts. So I'm not surprised when she says, "Do you have a theory about what he's up to?" I frame a careful reply. They told us at General Transgenics that he'd been tracked to Europe before the authorities lost sight of him. I paused and then added, I wonder if he might set up a lab in another country. There are many places in the world, my father says, in which a moneyed scientist can do whatever work he wants, without government oversight, without ethical guidelines, and, even in some cases, with government approval. There are countries where Dr. Wyatt and his research will be welcome. It might even be that his research is actually welcome here, in the U.S., covertly. And what do you think Wyatt's doing? I asked Dr. Fukuyama. Presumably, whatever it is he was doing at Wyatt Transgenics before he ran, I say. Do you subscribe to the theory that he's involved in human cloning? I shake my head. No, I say. That wouldn't be my guess. His primary interest was always transgenics. She nods. I agree. Abruptly, she pushes back her chair and turns to stare through the window at the blizzard. I watch her profile. We are quiet for a while, and then she says, "We are standing at a crossroads. At least, I hope we are. I hope we haven't already gone past it while we, as a society, weren't paying enough attention." She pauses for a second and then says, "Mr. Samuels, I want to tell you a story." She turns back to face me. She pulls up to her desk again. Many years ago, I was at a national conference on biogenetics. It wasn't purely a scientific conference. It was open to the public. The idea was that people from all walks of life, intelligent, thoughtful people, would discuss our dreams about what this technology might do for us. There were panel discussions on the eradication of MS and Parkinson's and Lou Gehrig's disease and on and on. We'd identify the genetic flaws and no one would suffer from them ever again. It was tremendously exciting because there was a feeling that we would really have the potential to eradicate all human suffering from the earth. There was a feeling almost of becoming godlike. It was electrifying, Mr. Samuels. I was as exhilarated as anyone, but then, on the last day of the conference, a young man stood up in the audience. We had all been listening to a speech about how prenatal testing was showing promising signs of making it possible to eliminate Down syndrome. And Dr. Fukuyama leans across the desk, her eyes intent on mine. Mr. Samuels, the young man who stood up in the audience to talk, had Down syndrome himself. He was the head of a self-advocacy group of adults with Down syndrome. I nod. We were a little taken aback, said Dr. Fukuyama. But the young man stood up, Mr. Samuels, and he said the following. I've never forgotten it. I don't understand. We don't make any trouble. We don't steal things or kill people. We don't take the good jobs. Why do you want to kill us? For a few seconds, I cannot breathe. I stare at Dr. Fukuyama. She stares back at me. Then she smiles, a little sadly. That moment changed everything for me. My excitement disappeared. I got a glimpse of a world we really might create, with our high-flying ideas about the eradication of suffering, a world in which so many people are found lacking, are considered unfit even to be born. My mother, I think, Kayla. There's a difference, Dr. Fukuyama said softly. That is my point, Mr. Samuels. There's a difference between using gene therapy for the treatment of existing medical conditions and using our growing but far from perfect knowledge of genes or of humanity to declare that we absolutely know who has and who hasn't a right to life at all. How a couple chooses to go about having a baby, or indeed in the future, the genetic makeup of that baby should be entirely their own business and their own choice. I lean closer to Dr. Fukuyama. I don't trust us, I say, my voice cracks. I don't trust us to be able to decide, even with the best of intentions. We might think we're eradicating suffering, but are we? We're only human. We don't know what'll happen even tomorrow. How can we make decisions that will affect all of our descendants forever? How can we possibly know what's best? I am clenching my hands in my lap. Dr. Fukuyama and I look at each other for a moment in silence. Then she says, I think you should take my seminar, Mr. Samuels. Come to the first class next Monday at 3 o'clock. I nod. I loosen my fist and breathe. Thank you, I say. I collect my coat and prepare to go. But then, at the door, I turn back. Dr. Fukuyama? Suddenly, my voice is okay again. Yes? This stuff you're talking about, it shouldn't be discussed only in small groups of graduate students. Exclusivity amounts to secrecy, and I think it's a mistake. It should be discussed everywhere with everyone, especially with kids. Let's try harder to make that happen. You ought to. Dr. Fukuyama's eyes flicker in surprise. I leave. Outside, the weather is worsening. The wind picking up, the snow falling thick and wet. I trudge back through the storm toward our apartment. I wonder if the weather will keep Viv from coming over for dinner tonight. I wonder what Kayla is doing right now. I think about Dr. Fukuyama's story about the conference and the young man with Down syndrome. And I wonder what Dr. Fukuyama would think if she could read Dr. Wyatt's research notes about Kayla. Kayla and I read the notes together, in silence, a couple of days after our time in the sub-basement. Even though Dr. Wyatt's hard drives had been taken away by the federal authorities, we had one of the backup CDs, and so we were able to find the answer to the question that Kayla had flung at Dr. Wyatt in the elevator. Why? This is what the note said. Like its siblings from the first harvest, egg number 5 carries a marker for Huntington's disease. However, it is otherwise healthy and make a good candidate for the experimental gene splicing technique. Auto-fertilize number 5, and then make 3 carefully selected localized changes to the developing embryo, attempting to encourage superior brain functionality and physical health. While it isn't likely that number 5 will survive long enough for implantation in the surrogate, it will nonetheless be useful to see how long it does last and what effect, if any, my changes have. This is, of course, little more than a stab in the dark. I wish I had enough eggs to make only one change at a time. 3 alterations done together is terrible science, but I don't have material to spare, and I must take the risk. I remember that every time I lose an egg, I also learn. Maybe someday I think I'll show the notes to Dr. Fukuyama. Maybe she will be the one to help us find the words to describe how it felt to read them. Right now, I don't have those words, and neither does Kayla. But we do have the data. We have each other. We have 2 healthy little sisters in Chicago and in Edgecombe, Maine, and in Clearwater, Florida, and the Los Islanders. And we have 1 little brother and 1 infant sister who have all sorts of problems. It's a funny thing. Kayla doesn't discuss her situation with me, but she'll talk about the kids. I think the kids getting to know them, understanding that they will need her, are what keeps her from despair right now. In time, I must believe there will be other reasons, maybe medical reasons, or maybe just life reasons. And it's not like there isn't medical hope, this says. It's not like scientific advancements are all suspect or evil. Far from it. She's right, of course. There's ongoing work in gene therapy. There might be a way one day to instruct the extra CAG repeats of chromosome 4 to lie quiet. I pray there will be. It is one of the areas I am so determined to study myself that at least it is in my control, so much is not. But we do have Dr. Wyatt's data. I stole one of the backup CDs before the police arrived in the sub-basement and simply walked out, cradling a thoroughly freaked out Fufu with the CD hidden securely beneath her bottom. We have the data. Then, and I will learn how to read it, and I will learn what it means. Chromosome by chromosome, gene by gene. I will learn who and what we are. But no matter what I learn, no matter what the GMAP says, I don't believe it predetermines who anyone can be. I don't believe it. I have only to look at my father, after all. We don't know the exact nature of our genetic relationship, my father and I, or even if there is one. We don't know the extent of why it's tinkering with some, but that most profoundly does not matter. Jonathan Sanders is my father. I am his son. We chose. I fight my way through the snow and the wind, and I am home.